Okay, ladies and gentlemen, the next panel that we have for you is something very close to my heart because I think it was around 2021 when I started coming into this space and I discovered that some of the most recognizable names in the blockchain world, names like CoinGecko, names like Etherscan, all had their offices based right here in Malaysia. And that was a revelation. So can we give them a round of applause? Welcome our Malaysia Boleh spirit, ladies and gentlemen, for the panel on Malaysian OGs, the Untold Story. Please welcome TM Lee from CoinGecko, Matthew Tan from Etherscan, and my good friend moderator, Harith Kamarul. All right, Harith, take it away.
Thanks, Chuck. So we don't have that much time, so I'm going to go right into it. I'm sure everybody here knows about Matt and TM and Etherscan and CoinGecko already. We want to get the untold story, so hopefully I get to ask some spicy questions. But before that, maybe not introduce your companies, but can you explain your story about how you got into crypto, what you were doing before, and how you started into the crypto space? Can go with TM.
So I guess I discovered crypto sometime in, I've seen it sometime in 2011, 2012 on the internet, but I just like brush it off because I don't really know what it means. Like I saw Bitcoin, people losing their coins and whatnot. But my background is technical. I have no idea about finance, right? So it doesn't really relate to me. But I think when I came back to Malaysia, because I was studying in the US for a bit, I came back to Malaysia and I was trying to build a SaaS product, but it wasn't easy to get a payment provider. So there was no Stripe, there was no Braintree. There's no way for like a solo dev to build a website and charge people globally for it. I contacted a few payment providers locally and they said, I need like 250,000 ringgit and a company incorporated with the startup capital to get the paperwork going. So then I discovered that I could charge people with Bitcoin, and that's sort of like where the turning point started. And then I discovered, I sort of understood like how like gold and silver kind of work in history of money, and then sort of tied together, and that's sort of like a match made in heaven, and got me down further into the rabbit hole. Yeah.
Matt?
Yeah, so I've been in the IT space close to 30 years. so I think so I first actually started my career as an IT specialist in the late 90s. So I did that 3 years. Some of you are probably not born yet. And spent the next 15 years doing the transition from the Web 1.0 to Web 2.0. So we were actually building out a lot of software and a lot of cool stuff back then. So in 2013, I first heard of Bitcoin in 2011. So it was from Hacker News. And being Malaysian, right, when you come across a news that says, hey, you have a way to literally print money. So it was really exciting back then. So 2013, 2014, started building out some apps. And obviously in 2015 with the Ethereum white paper, well, actually it was just in 2014, I decided to do this full time. And here I am. So we've been building over the last 9 years.
And TM, so you're not the only founder of CoinGecko. Can you share a little bit of how you guys met each other and started on this journey?
Yeah, so Bobby, which is my co-founder, we've been doing this for 10 plus years already. CoinGecko just turned 10 sometime in April. It's been a long journey, and I think it was very much by chance. So when I got excited about Bitcoin sometime in 2013-14, I was actually working in Singapore for a company at the time. And I was really, really excited about Bitcoin. I've been telling all my colleagues about it. And so happened, Bobby was friends with my boss, my CTO at the time. And he happened to visit the office. And so happened I was there as well. And he said that, hey, why don't you guys chat? Because it seems like both of you are the two guys who are crazy about Bitcoin, because nobody understood what we were talking about. So at that time, it was really a close niche group. I remember when in Singapore, I attended the first Bitcoin meetup. There was only about 15 to 20 people. And then as the price of Bitcoin moves, the size of the meetup will sort of go along with it, right? It will expand and contract. depending on it. So that was like the time. But yeah, it was really by chance. I never knew him before, like from a long time, and then we exchanged contact. And when I get back to Malaysia, we decide to just build something together, right? So there is quite a journey because, like, we don't really know each other enough. So what we ended up doing was, Bobby was building his altcoin crypto newsletter, and I was building a micropayment service in Bitcoin. And then both of us sort of like, okay, both of us are quite into this. We can probably combine our strength and build something. And we were just going down the list, and then eventually we decided on CoinGecko because that's sort of like the strengths that we have culminated in the product.
And yeah, so you've been together a long time. I just want to touch a little bit. And you're co-founders, first-time co-founders. How do you handle like a shared idea of the direction of the company, and any disagreements that you can share about with the audience?
Yeah, actually for me, I actually have a little bit of experience with co-founders even before with Bobby, right? So actually when in college, I worked with two other guys. We're really talented people actually. We actually built like a flight search aggregator together, right? So this was something like just three of us, like we don't even know, like we didn't plan for anything, we just go ahead and build this thing, right? And obviously like a lot of things weren't thought out and we didn't discuss upfront and we never had any direction, and then there were a lot of like conflicts here and there, but eventually we had different direction and we had to part ways. But I think from that experience itself, I knew what to look out for, and that's also the reason why like me and Bobby, like we built our own thing to test the water and slowly like gradually get into things, right? So I actually had some experience in that episode, and then when it comes to this, I guess it's more like at that time we were treating CoinGecko as a side project. So none of us also have much of expectation. We only have interest in the space, and the interests sort of like continue to stay aligned for a long time. I mean, there are going to be some shortcomings and whatnot, but I think at the end of the day is are we sort of like seeing this journey as bringing us forward into the industry? And it did, right? Because both of us sort of like get to speak to people in the industry, like coming from someone with no finance or big tech background, like we get to speak to smart people and whatnot. So I think like that sort of like brought us all the way in. But of course, there's always going to be ups and downs along the way. Yeah.
And Matt, you were CTO for a very long time. What pushed you into becoming a CEO of your own company?
I'm actually still a CTO. So on my end, as far as like founders and all, so I obviously I was a co-founder of a different company, and we were actually doing it for 15 years, so 15. So it's a very long time. When you work with someone for 15 years, you're basically partners, right? I think if I had one advice on like the co-founder portion, right, don't do your shares equally. Don't do 50-50. It just leads into a lot of issues, and we had it in a 50-50 partnership. So I think along the way, people kind of drift away, and then your alignment kind of changes. So no wrong, no right. Just your alignment changes over a 15-year period. As for, I think at heart, I'm still a software engineer, and being a CEO, it's probably easier to be a CEO if you are transitioning from a CTO versus vice versa. I think that's how kind of look at it. And I think being a CTO, it allows me to understand what the engineers are running into issues and a lot of product-related issues. So to sum it up, I think it's something that, it's one of those things that you have to do, right? So then you kind of step up and figure out how to do it.
And there are a bunch of devs in ETHKL. So if any of them are interested in founding their own startup, and they're technical people, is there any suggestions for you guys in like how to come up as a founder, how to find a co-founder, whether you should be more a CEO or just focus on the technical part?
You mean like starting up a company?
Yeah, like someone here possibly who just finished the hackathon. What would be like any advice you can tell them?
So I think a lot of us actually started our projects as side projects, right? When I started Etherscan, it wasn't, actually it was just a kind of fun project back then. And
I hope it's still fun.
It's still fun, I think. Still fun. So we started it more like a fun project that, I started a more fun project that you could add value back to the ecosystem. As for advice for someone wanting to do it, I think the advice is still the same, regardless of whether it's Web3. Obviously, you want to find, I know it sounds cliche, but I think you want to find something that you have interest in. So it shouldn't be purely money-driven. I think the money and stuff, those things will come later, but find something that you want, that you're genuinely interested in. The reason I say that is because I think that whole journey, when you spend it a lot of time, right, it actually goes down a lot to your ability to preserve, having grit, and just being able to push on. And that will eventually come back, and that passion will come back and help you drive through.
Yeah, I think on my end is never be afraid to just put things out there in public. So as dev, you're always just building, it could be a product that you can just put out in the world, or it could be your open source code base, you can just put it out on GitHub or GitLab and get criticized by people, right? So I think that's the fastest way to learn. Because like how else are you gonna get like intense training? I think on my end, like I never had experience working in like big tech companies or whatnot, but it's more like putting out there, people criticize what we work on, and then just figure out, and then when you hit a roadblock, and then just keep trying. And I think there are people who will give you like ideas along the way. So I think along the way is just putting things out there and never be shy about what. Because I think we Malaysians, we tend to be very reserved. We always want to put out the best code out there before we're ready. But even if it's half-baked, like just release it.
Okay, and this might be a spicy question. Both CoinGecko and Etherscan are seen as, by a lot of people, as public goods in this space. So both of you are running for-profit companies. Can you share like how you got to that direction at the start of the company, whether to do it as a for-profit or as a non-profit?
Okay, so I first took my serious step into like this industry in it was 2013. So I built out a product called BlockScan, which is like a explorer for Bitcoin back then. So the first way I did it was when I went to the space, I was trying to figure out like, I know if you want to build something, how do you keep this sustainable, right? So obviously I put in my own money back then, but that didn't really turn out well. So the project collapsed. So when Ethereum came along in 2014, 2015-ish, right? So I actually tried to do a slightly different approach. So I applied for a grant. But obviously this was back in early 2015, and the ecosystem was, I mean, back then Ether was like 90 cents, right? The ecosystem was a lot different. And understandably, we did not get the grant. So when we did not get the grant, then it was back to the drawing board and trying to figure out, okay, like, so I will still put in my own funds, but you know, like, how long are you going to be able to put in your funds? That won't take you so long. So back in 2016, we kind of decided, okay, maybe what we can do, well, it's 2015, so we would go the traditional route. So this was before ICOs, so you didn't really have an option. So we actually like raised a very small round in Silicon Valley and stuff like that, you know, that very traditional route. The only difference that we did is that instead of staying in the US, we brought the money back and we decided to build out the company where it is. So that leads us to where we are with Etherscan today. So how do I describe Etherscan? So it is a for-profit company, but that doesn't really fully maximize the profit portion, and it's somewhat of a public good. So it's kind of how we arrive at that portion, and that's still the driving force that we have today.
Yeah, I think definitely because Bobby and I has this philosophy where we follow the thinking of David Heinemeier Hansen and Jason Fried from Basecamp, where you bootstrap your company and go for profitability as soon as possible. So for CoinGecko's case, like we bootstrap the company and we actually aim for profit as soon as we can because we have no runway or VC funding to back it. So what we end up doing was running it as cheap as possible and just enough to sort of like pay back its server costs and whatnot. So I have some, we kind of have experience with running advertising products like in the past. So we were putting ads in CoinGecko, and at the time, even though the market is small, but because we keep our like costs really low and it's just two of us, so we are always aiming for profitability from the start because that's the only way to keep your company like sustainable over time. But I guess sometime in the middle of the journey, we decided to open up our API, which is we give out for free. It's a public API that anyone can just build. I think the mindset at the time was that the crypto market was in a bear market, and how else can we like expand the pie, right? So the only way is to give our pricing data for free, so developers can come in and build something using the price API for free and move on and introduce new use cases. So there was a time where I feel like we were kind of like borderline, we were subsidizing the market. But at the end, as the market grows and grows, like we had to find a way to keep this public good continuing, but with the mindset of still aiming for profitability to keep the company sustained. So today, like the API has both a public free model and a paid model. Again, I think very similar to Etherscan. Like I feel that people tell us that we leave money on the table here and there.
Yeah, often, very.
Yeah, but I guess that's the nature of what drives us. Yeah.
Okay, and you've been through a lot over the years. Have you ever felt like basically just giving up and retire and enjoy your early gains? TM first.
Actually, there was a time where both of us were about to give up and like sell the company. It was about 2016. Yeah, it was just. I think it was at a time where Bitcoin was like rock bottom, $200, I think. And then even the Bitcoin core dev decided to quit, right? I don't know if anyone remember that moment, but then we were like, oh, are two of us like are we the idiots now? Like, are we in this space that's never going to grow? So we actually were looking for buyers, but I think the space was just too small for anyone to even consider us. So then what ends up happening is that, yeah, we can't sell the company, so let's just keep running it and maintain the server as is. And then, yeah, I think what happened in 2017, we were just seeing growth that we cannot ignore. And then, yeah, that's when we decided to just go all in. But there was a period of time where it was very close. And I think a lot of Bitcoin companies or crypto companies at the time were in a tough situation. And a lot of them, if they held on, like things will be very, very different as well.
I think that's when I met Bobby and TM. So we actually had a chat, I think in like Oasis or like somewhere, right? So we were actually looking at investing in CoinGecko. So that's one of the big regrets that we didn't manage to make it back then. But I totally understand. I think we were actually, so that's how we kind of got to know each other. I met these two really young, bright kids back then. But I think Bobby is still working back then. Yeah, so I guess on my end, I haven't really spoken much about this publicly. Maybe there was just once that I wouldn't say I wanted to give up, but there was just once when I thought like, why am I doing this? I mean, it's just like it's a lot of pressure and stuff like that. So maybe once in 2016, so way back before we kind of took it up. So I think it was, so again, here I was like 41 years old, and like 2 kids in school, wife still working in a normal company and stuff like that, right? And so we were supposed to go down to Silicon Valley, do the accelerator, right? And so I spoke to a friend who was supposed to accompany me, but he bailed out FFK at the last minute. And then it was another person who also FFK. FFK meaning they bailed out the last minute. And so it's only, I think, it's one of our teammates here, Vichuan, who actually decided to say, hey, I'll follow you, right? So, so shout out to Vichuan. So I think it was during that time I had a conversation with my wife actually back then, like whether or not we should actually do this. So I think that was the only time that we actually kind of shed tears and stuff like that. I know it kind of sounds weird, and you shouldn't be doing that, but you have to understand I was doing what I was doing for the last 15 years. It was very comfortable. And to restart everything, right, and give up a relatively comfortable thing, going into a space that is just so much different from me, that requires you from a CTO going to CEO. I didn't like to go out and pitch. I didn't like to go out and talk. But in Silicon Valley, one of the things that you have to do, you have to pitch every day. And I actually hated it. Yeah, and I don't even actually like talking here too much. But so that's the whole thing.
You were forced into this?
Well, we forced to do it, and we just do it. I think, and that's one of the things that we always try to do. We just try to push forward, take baby steps, and move forward. And hopefully that pays off some dividend.
And I think one of you mentioned ICOs just now. So the flip side of the question is, have either of you been tempted to do an ICO with the crazy valuations that everybody raises? Have you ever had that temptation?
We always talk about it,
Yeah,
we always
always.
joke about it, but I think like the thing is that if you do a token, you need to have a reason for it and a utility for it. So, but we always like joke about it. So
Yeah, I think we always have that conversation. Tokens, no tokens. I think, at least for me personally, right, I think I want to believe, right, at the end of the day, right, you can get by over a longer term period just by building a product that has value, supporting your users, and be more user and product driven. The ICOs kind of make sense, I guess, for certain projects. If you're a network based and stuff like that. But I think for projects like what we're doing, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, and it kind of feels like it's in easy way out. So maybe people will like it for tortured.
Not maximizing profits. And so you've been here since 2013-ish, both of you, from the early days when you were having sort of crypto meetups with maybe like, I don't know, 10 people at a Papa Rich. So how has the scene changed, both Malaysia and internationally? What have you seen change and what are you like excited about?
yeah, I think the scene, well, the kind of crowd that I think that's an evolution of the type of crowd, right? So the early stage is always like the early adopters. These are people who are technologists or people who are looking for the best way to remit money, and there's always that kind, or people who are libertarian and whatnot. And then as it evolved, I think sometime in 2017, there's like more and more like mainstream people from like other sector coming into the space. So I think like that's like the thing that sort of like evolved. But I think the one thing that's always constant is always developer involvement. So I think even in 2013, I think what fascinated me or what attracted me to the space was that I was a developer myself in the Web2 space, but when I came into the Bitcoin meetup, I saw some developers building like exchange, POS system, or even a way to tokenize something because they were playing with like color coins and whatnot. So I thought that was very, very interesting, and that actually got me in and gave me a very, and even today, like we are looking at devs, right, dev crowd, but that was the time, like even in Bitcoin days, there were like that dev crowd as a temperature check. But even until today, like that's the crowd that always remain constant. And as long as there is these builders, like the industry will continue to see use cases and grow. But yeah.
So on my end, one question we obviously got asked is about talent, right? So I think, at least for me, the main big difference right now is that there is more awareness in the ecosystem. There's this younger breed of talent, meaning that you have strong support from the universities and all. So it's actually probably just, I guess, it's easier to get people to work on projects right now in Web3 in comparison to back then. So back then, it was just an extreme challenge just to explain to people what, back then was blockchain, so it was actually extremely difficult just to explain to people what blockchains were. And if you actually explain to someone what blockchains were, they always thought it was like a scam or like a money game. So today it's probably easier in that aspect. So it's basically more awareness, and that's how kind of how I look at it.
Okay. I think I have time for maybe one or two last questions. Something that actually has been happening for the last 1 year plus for both companies is that you've had acquisitions of other projects. So can you share some of the sort of experience, what that was like as a Malaysian founder acquiring other companies?
So I think relative to Etherscan, we do a small acquisition, a very simple, straightforward one. So the process was quite quick. I think we spent about like 4, 5, 6 months or so. I mean, if I think back, like I would say, long story short, there's a lot of lessons for me to learn. Obviously, you hear a lot about acquisition stories like here and there, but there's also a lot of work that goes before and after and post and whatnot. But I guess right now is, yeah, there is a lot that goes into it, and I think for me is I know what to look out for in the future, but there's always a lot of thought that needs to be put out before you decide to pull the trigger and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think on our end, we also did a relatively small acquisition around the same time as they did. And it's kind of weird. We actually did an acquisition of his company, one of the companies they invested in. So to cut it short, I think we wouldn't be able to put it off on my own. So obviously it was help from the teammates and all. One of the things I think that we actually looked at was very simple. We actually didn't really look at the company. We didn't really look too much on the product, but we were actually looking just at the team. So I think the key for us, right, is at the end there is a team. I think if we have a strong team, and we actually evaluated based on that, was the team good? Will the team be able to stay on? The last thing you want to do is to do a small acquisition, get half the team to leave within the next 6 months. So on my humble opinion, one key thing you should look at is the team.
All right, and on that note, thanks for your time, and please give them a round of applause, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, TM. Thank you, Matthew. And thank you, Harith. You did a really good job interviewing your boss.